"Move it, or I'll have security drag you out." Caroline Harrington's voice dripped with disdain as she dismissed Sarafina with a wave of her diamond-clad hand. To the socialite, Sarafina was just a hoodie-wearing nobody trying to scam a first-class seat. Caroline didn't know that the woman she was humiliating was the billionaire architect of the very navigation software the pilot was waiting on to take off. Sarafina didn't argue. She simply pulled out her phone and sent a 4-word text that would not only ground the flight, but dismantle Caroline's entire world. The controlled chaos of JFK's Terminal 4 was a symphony Sarafina Jones knew well. The frantic clicks of roller bags against polished floors, the multilingual announcements echoing from unseen speakers, the low hum of thousands of intersecting journeys. It was the soundtrack of her life. Yet to any casual observer, she was just another face in the river of humanity flowing towards the gates. Dressed in a simple charcoal grey cashmere hoodie, tailored black joggers and a pair of unassuming but meticulously crafted sneakers, Sarafina projected an aura of deliberate anonymity. Her hair was styled in intricate box braids that cascaded over her shoulders, adorned with a few subtle gold cuffs that caught the light. There was no flashy luggage, no ostentatious designer logos screaming for attention, just a sleek, minimalist black leather backpack slung over one shoulder, containing a laptop that held the blueprints for technologies poised to redefine the future of aviation. At 28, Sarafina, or Syria to her inner circle, was the founder and CEO of Ethereum Dynamics, a name that was whispered with a mixture of awe and envy in the exclusive circles of aerospace and technology. Her company, which she had built from a single algorithm she coded in her college dorm room, was now a titan in satellite communication and predictive flight logistics. She was a billionaire several times over, but she wore her success like she wore her clothes comfortably, without the need for external validation. Her journey today was from New York to London, a routine flight on Global Skies Airlines flight GS710. This trip, however, was anything but routine. On the other end awaited a consortium of European investors, a final handshake on a deal that would inject another $5 billion into her latest venture, a revolutionary system for real-time atmospheric data analysis that promised TAR to make air travel exponentially safer and more efficient. As she navigated through the priority check-in line, she noticed the subtle glances she received. They weren't looks of recognition, but of assessment. A young black woman in the first-class line, dressed in what appeared to be loungewear, often triggered a silent, judgmental calculus in the minds of others. She'd seen it 1,000 times, the flicker of surprise, the faint curl of a lip, the mental sorting into categories where she seemingly didn't belong. She had long ago stopped letting it bother her. Their ignorance was a shield for her, allowing her to move through the world unburdened by the suffocating weight of fame. She handed her passport to the agent, who gave her a professionally bland smile. "Good afternoon, Miss Jones. Window seat 1A. You're all set. The Starlight Lounge is to your right, just past security. Boarding for your flight will begin in approximately 45 minutes at gate B24. "Thank you, Sarah," said her voice, calm and melodic. She bypassed the lounge. She preferred the quiet anonymity of the public seating area, where she could observe the beautiful, messy tapestry of humanity without interruption. She found a seat near her gate, pulled out a worn paperback novel, a classic sci-fi by Octavia Butler, and submerged herself in its world, the airport symphony fading into a distant murmur. She was a ghost, a silent observer, a woman of immense power hiding in plain sight. It was her preferred mode of existence, but she knew that sometimes the world forced you to reveal your hand. As the boarding call for flight GS 710 finally echoed through the terminal, Syria closed her book, tucked it into her backpack, and stood up. She had a $5 billion deal to close and an ocean to cross. She walked toward the gate, completely unaware that her carefully constructed shield of anonymity was about to be shattered, not by a business rival or a journalist, but by the casual, ingrained prejudice of a fellow passenger in seat 1A. The first-class cabin of the Boeing 77 was an oasis of muted grays and soft lighting designed to soothe the nerves of the world's elite travelers. The scent of warm towels and a faint hint of champagne hung in the air. Sarafina offered a small smile to the flight attendant greeting passengers at the door and made her way down the short aisle to the front row. Seat 1A, her seat a private pod with a lie-flat bed, a personal minor, and a wide entertainment screen. More importantly, it was the window seat she had specifically chosen months in advance for its privacy, but it was occupied. A woman who looked to be in her late 50s was comfortably settled in her designer handbag, placed on the adjacent seat 11B. She had perfectly coiffed blonde hair, a face tightened by expensive procedures, and was dressed in a crisp, cream-colored linen suit that looked completely out of place for a long-haul flight. She was loudly detailing her recent trip to the Hamptons to another passenger across the aisle, her voice laced with a sense of effortless superiority. Sarafina paused, checked her boarding pass again, and then looked at the woman. She waited for a natural pause in the conversation, but one didn't seem to be forthcoming. "Excuse me," Syria said politely, her voice quiet but clear. The woman, whose name was Caroline Harrington, stopped mid-sentence and turned her head slowly, her eyes scanning Syria from her sneakers to her hoodie with a look of undisguised disdain. It was a practiced, withering glance, designed to make its recipient feel small and insignificant. "Yes." Caroline's tone was sharp, impatient. "I believe you're in my seat," Syria said, holding up her boarding pass. "I have one." Caroline glanced at the ticket in Syria's hand and then waved a dismissive hand as if she shooing away a fly. "Oh, that must be a mistake. I always sit here. The airline knows. Just find another seat, dear. I'm sure there are plenty of others." She then turned back to her conversation, the matter clearly settled in her mind. Syria stood her ground. "I don't think it's a mistake. My pass says 1A. Could you please check yours?" With an exaggerated theatrical sigh, Caroline fished a ticket from her handbag. She glanced at it for a fraction of a second. "It says 1B, but that's ridiculous. I need the window. The lighting is better for my complexion." Besides, she added her voice, dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was intentionally loud enough for Syria to hear. "I think you'd be more comfortable somewhere else. These seats are for our most loyal customers." The implication was thick and suffocating. "You are not one of us. You do not belong here." Syria felt a familiar, weary tightening in her chest, but her expression remained impassive. "Loyalty status doesn't change a seat assignment. I booked this seat specifically. I'd appreciate it if you would move to your assigned seat." Her calm, firm tone seemed to infuriate Caroline. The woman's face flushed a blotchy red. "Now listen here. I am a Platinum Elite Diamond member with this airline. I've spent more money on flights this year than you've probably earned in your life. I am not moving. End of story." The conversation had now attracted the attention of a flight attendant, a young man named Mark with a forced customer service smile plastered on his face. "Is there a problem here, ladies?" Caroline immediately seized the opportunity, transforming into a frail victim. "Oh, thank goodness. This young woman is harassing me. She's insisting this is her seat, but there's clearly been a mix-up, and she's becoming quite aggressive." Mark looked from Caroline's frantic performance to Syria's placid demeanor. He was young and clearly intimidated by Caroline's display of wealth and status. He turned to Syria. "Mum, let me see your boarding pass." Sarah handed it to him. He scanned it, then looked at his onboard tablet. "Yes, you are assigned to 1A, and Mum," he said, turning to Caroline, "you are in 1B. "Well, the system is wrong," Caroline snapped. "I told you I always sit here. Can't you just move her?" "Look at all the empty seats." Mark's eyes darted around the cabin. It was true several other seats were still available. He was clearly looking for the path of least resistance, the quickest way to defuse the situation and get the flight underway. "Mum," he said to Syria, his voice now pleading. "I understand this is your assigned seat, but to avoid any further disruption, would you be willing to take for A instead? It's also a window seat. I can even offer you a complimentary bottle of champagne for the inconvenience." Syria looked at Mark, his youth and inexperience, evident in his desperate attempt to plead the louder, more belligerent passenger. She understood his position, but she also understood the principle at stake. This wasn't about a window. It was about the casual, venomous racism that allowed Carolyn to believe she had more right to a space than the black woman who had paid for it. Giving in would validate that belief. "No," Syria said, her voice dropping to a lower, more resolute pitch. "I am not moving. I booked seat 1A. I have a boarding pass for seat 1A, and I will be sitting in seat 1A. Please ask this woman to move to her assigned seat." The finality in her tone was unmistakable. Mark's smile faltered. Caroline Harrington's face contorted in a mask of pure fury. The battle lines had been drawn. The air in the first-class cabin grew thick with tension. Other passengers, now settled in their seats, were watching the drama unfold with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. Mark, the flight attendant, looked completely out of his depth. He was caught between an immovable object and an unstoppable force of entitlement. "Mum, please." He tried again with Caroline, his voice wavering slightly. "We need to get everyone seated so we can depart on time. Your seat is right here." He gestured to Oneb, the aisle seat, right next to where she was sitting. Caroline scoffed, crossing her arms defiantly. "I am not moving, and I will not be spoken to like this. It's utterly ridiculous. This is a simple customer service issue. The customer, the real customer," she said, glaring at Sarah, "is always right. You should have upgraded her as a courtesy for even being in this cabin, not tried to displace a loyal patron." The insult, layered with racial and class-based prejudice, hung in the air. Syria didn't flinch. She simply met Caroline's gaze with a calm, unreadable expression. Her stillness seemed to enrage the other woman even more. "What's the problem with you?" Caroline's voice rose, becoming shrill. "Can't you understand some people have status? Some people matter to this airline, and some people just get lucky with a misplaced upgrade voucher. Take the champagne and move along." "This isn't about an upgrade," Syria stated evenly. "This is about my ticket for my seat, and your behavior is becoming disruptive." Disruptive? Caroline shrieked, her voice echoing through the quiet cabin. "I'll show you disruptive. I'm going to have your job," she snarled at Mark, "and I'm going to file a complaint against this person for harassment." Mark pled visions of disciplinary hearings and angry supervisors dancing in his head. He knew he was losing control of the situation. "Mum, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice. I will not. Not until you remove her." A senior flight attendant, a woman named Linda, with years of experience etched around her eyes, arrived from the galley drawn by the commotion. She took in the scene in a single, swift glance. Mark's panicked expression, Caroline's belligerent posture, and Syria's almost pretty, natural calm. "Mark, what's going on?" Linda asked, her voice a low, nonsense hum. "There's a seat discrepancy," Mark stammered. "This passenger is in 1A, but her ticket is for 1B. The passenger for 1A won't take another seat." Linda turned her professional, unsiling gaze to Caroline. "Mum, I need you to move to your assigned seat immediately. We are on a tight schedule, and you are holding up the departure of this aircraft." Caroline seemed to realize that Linda was not as easily intimidated as Mark. She shifted her tactics. "This is outrageous. I am the victim here. I've been threatened and verbally assaulted. I want to speak to the captain now." Linda's eyes narrowed. Involving the captain was a significant escalation. It took a situation from a customer service issue to a potential flight security problem, but Caroline had demanded it, and airline protocol was clear. "Very well," Linda said, her voice cold as ice. "Please wait here." She spoke into her handset, her words clipped and precise. "Captain Roster, we have a passenger dispute in first class that requires your attention, a refusal to comply with crew instructions. The use of that specific phrase, refusal to comply, was a serious code. It changed everything." A hush fell over the cabin. Even Caroline seemed to momentarily grasp that she might have pushed things too far. A few minutes later, a figure emerged from the cockpit. Captain Ava Roster was a tall, imposing woman in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and silver streaks in her dark, pulled-back hair. She exuded an aura of absolute, unshakable authority. She was not just a pilot. She was the master of this vessel, and her expression made it clear that she had no time for trivialities. Her gaze swept over the 3 people standing in the aisle, assessing, analyzing. Caroline immediately launched into her performance. "Captain, thank God you're here," she began, her voice dripping with manufactured distress. "Your staff is allowing this woman to harass me. I have been a loyal customer for 20 years, and I am being treated like a common criminal, all because of a simple ticketing error." Captain Roster listened without interruption, her eyes fixed on Caroline. Then she turned her gaze to Syria. She saw no aggression, no anger. She saw a young woman standing with quiet dignity, her backpack held loosely in one hand, waiting patiently to be heard. "And you, Mom?" the captain asked, her voice a calm, deep baritone. "What is your side of this?" Syria met the captain's gaze directly. "My side is very simple, Captain," she said, her voice steady. "My boarding pass is for seat 1A, that is seat 1A. I would like to sit in my seat, so this flight can depart." There was no drama, no embellishment, just the simple, unassailable truth. The stark contrast between Caroline's hysterical theatrics and Syria's quiet confidence was not lost on the veteran captain. Ava Roster had dealt with hundreds of disruptive passengers in her career. She knew a genuine grievance from a manufactured one, and she was beginning to suspect this was far more than just a simple seating dispute. Captain Roster held Serafina's gaze for a long moment, seeing a level of composure that was rare in these situations. She then turned back to Caroline Harrington, whose face was a mask of indignant expectation, certain the captain would side with her. "Mum," Captain Roster said to Caroline, her voice leaving no room for argument. "I have your boarding pass information here. You are assigned to seat 1B. This passenger," she gestured to Syria, "is assigned to 1A. This is not a ticketing error. It is the correct assignment. Please move to your seat now." Caroline's jaw dropped. She had expected deference, an immediate apology, and the swift removal of Syria. The captain's blunt, authoritative command caught her completely off guard. But my status," she sputtered. "I'm Platinum Elite. Doesn't that mean anything? It means you are a frequent flyer for which the airline is grateful. The captain replied, her tone as crisp as the winter air over Siberia. "It does not grant you the right to another passenger's assigned seat or to disregard the instructions of my flight crew. This is my final request. Move to seat 1B or we will have you deplaned." The word deplaned hung in the air like a guillotine. The public humiliation, the disruption to her plans. The threat was real and immediate. For the first time, a flicker of genuine fear appeared in Caroline's eyes. She shot a look of pure venom at Syria, as if this was all her fault. Grumbling under her breath, Caroline began to move, grabbing her handbag from seat 1B and clumsily shifting her body into the aisle seat. She made a great show of her displeasure, sighing heavily and muttering about abysmal service and reverse discrimination. Syria simply stepped past her and settled into seat 1A, placing her backpack under the seat in front of her. She looked out the window, her posture relaxed, as if the entire confrontation had been a minor inconvenience, like a fly buzzing near her ear. The captain gave a curt nod. "Thank you for your cooperation," she said to the now fuming Caroline. She then turned to Syria. "My apologies for the disturbance, Miss Jones. We'll be underway shortly." As the captain turned to leave, Syria spoke, her voice still quiet, but carrying a new note of authority that made Captain Rostow pause. Captain Rostoya said, "I appreciate you resolving this, but I would like to note for the record that your flight attendant, Mark, attempted to appease Mrs. Harrington by asking me to move, despite my valid ticket. He offered me champagne as compensation for giving up my seat to a woman who was racially profiling me." The captain turned back slowly, her expression hardening. This was a serious allegation. Syria continued, "I know Global Skies Airlines has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination as outlined in your Employee Conduct Manual, Section 7, Subsection B. I also know that flight crews are trained to de-escalate by enforcing the rules, not by asking the wronged party to concede, especially not when the aggression is so clearly one-sided." Captain Roster stared at her. How did this passenger know the specific section of their internal conduct manual that wasn't public information? It was part of the intensive training all employees, especially pilots and cabin crew, underwent. "You seem very familiar with our policies." "Miss Jones." The captain said, her tone shifting from professional courtesy to intrigued suspicion. Zoria offered a small, enigmatic smile. "I'm a stakeholder. I believe it's important to know how one's assets are being managed." The word stakeholder was ambiguous. It could mean she held a few shares of stock. It could mean she was part of a corporate travel program. But the way she said it with such quiet, unshakable confidence suggested something far more significant. Before Captain Rostow could inquire further, Caroline Harrington, unable to leave well enough alone, decided to hurl one final parting shot. "Stakeholder. Oh, please." She sneered from seat 1B, loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "You probably got a stock option handout from whatever affirmative action program got you your job. You don't belong here, and you know it." The ugliness of the comment was breathtaking. It sucked the remaining air out of the cabin. The flight attendants froze. Captain Rostow's face became a thundercloud. Syria, however, did not react. She didn't look at Caroline. She didn't raise her voice. She simply reached into her backpack, pulled out her sleek black smartphone, and unlocked the screen. Her thumb hovered over a single contact saved in her favorites. She looked up at Captain Roster, her eyes calm, but holding a glint of steel. "Captain," she said, her voice perfectly level, "I'm afraid this passenger's behavior has now escalated from a seating dispute to a level of harassment that I am not willing to tolerate on one of my carriers. I need to make a call. One of my carriers." The phrase landed with the force of a physical blow. Captain Rostow felt a sudden chilling realization that she was standing in the presence of someone far more important than she could have possibly imagined. She watched speechless as Syria Jones pressed the call button. The phone call connected on the first ring. Sarafina didn't even put the phone to her ear. She put it on speaker, the volume just loud enough for those nearest to her. Captain Rostow Linder, and a mortified-looking Mark to hear clearly. A man's voice, warm and instantly recognizable to anyone in the aviation industry, came through the speaker. "Syria, is everything all right? I thought you'd be in the air by now." It was Sir Richard Sterling, the celebrated founder and CEO of the entire Global Skies airline group. "Richard, my apologies for calling you directly." Syria said, her tone as casual as if she were calling a friend to confirm dinner plans. "We have a slight delay on GR710 out of JFK. In seat 1B, Caroline Harrington's sneer began to falter, a sliver of confusion piercing through her self-righteous anger. She recognized the name, of course, but the context made no sense. It had to be a trick, a delay. "What's the issue?" The mechanical Sir Richard's voice was sharp with concern. "No, not mechanical," Syria replied smoothly. "We have a passenger in seat 1B, a Caroline Harrington. She's a Platinum Elite member." The captain's eyes widened. Syria knew the passenger's name without having been told. She must have access to the flight manifest. Syria continued. "She has been verbally abusive, refused to comply with initial crew instructions, and has made a series of racially charged remarks. It's creating a hostile and unsafe environment in the cabin before we've even left the gate. Captain Rostow is here with me now." She handled the seat situation professionally, but the passenger's harassment has continued. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, followed by a sigh that was heavy with frustration. "Syria, I am so sorry. This is completely unacceptable. Put the captain on." Syria held the phone out to Captain Roster, who took it as if it were a live grenade. Captain Roster, speaking, Sir Richard Ava. Sir Richard's voice was now hard as iron. "You have my full authority. Ms. Harrington is to be removed from the aircraft immediately. Her Platinum Elite status is to be revoked effective immediately, and she is to be placed on the permanent no-fly list for all Global Skies carriers and our partner airlines. Am I understood?" "Yes, sir." "Understood," Captain Rostifer replied, her mind reeling. "The safety and dignity of our passengers, and especially our partners, is non-negotiable." Sir Richard continued, his voice resonating from the small speaker. "Ethan Dynamics is our single most important strategic partner. Ms. Jones is not just a passenger. She is for all intents and purposes our boss when it comes to the technology that keeps our planes in the air. The fact that she was subjected to this on one of our flights is a profound failure, and it will be dealt with. Please offer her my deepest, most sincere apologies." And Ava ground the flight. "Sir," the captain asked, stunned. "Ground the flight?" "Yes. Don't just deplane the passenger. Ground the entire flight. I want a full security and compliance sweep. I want every member of that cabin crew interviewed before you take off. I want a message sent so clearly that it will never be forgotten. This behavior will not be tolerated on Global Skies. Not now. Not ever. The disruption to the schedule is a small price to pay." "Do you understand?" "Yes, Sir Richard. I understand completely." "Good. Keep me updated." The line went dead. Captain Rostow handed the phone back to Syria, her hand trembling slightly. She looked at this young woman in a hoodie, a woman she had mistaken for just another passenger, and finally saw her for who she was: power. True, quiet, world-changing power. Caroline Harrington, in seat 1B, was ashen. The color had drained from her face, leaving behind a pasty, terrified mask. The words from the speaker had finally penetrated her thick skull of privilege. Ethereal Dynamics' strategic partner, our boss. She was beginning to understand the catastrophic miscalculation she had made. Syria tucked her phone back into her backpack, her expression unchanged. She hadn't smiled in triumph. She hadn't gloated. She had simply stated the facts and allowed the consequences to unfold as they must. Captain Rostow turned to Linda, her senior flight attendant. "Linda, get on the horn to gate operations. Inform them we are grounding the flight pending a security review. No one gets on or off until I say so." Linda nodded, her eyes wide with shock, and hurried towards the galley. The captain then turned to face the first ass cabin, her voice BMD, with an authority that left no room for doubt. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. May I have your attention, please?" Every eye was on her. Due to a serious security and compliance issue in the forward cabin, this aircraft is now grounded. Please remain in your seats. The jet bridge will be reattached, and airport security will be boarding shortly. We will provide you with more information as soon as it becomes available. A wave of confusion and panicked murmurs washed through the entire plane from first class to the last row of economy. A flight being grounded after boarding was a rare and serious event. They were trapped, and no one knew why. No one except for Caroline Harrington, who sat frozen in her seat, finally terrifyingly aware that her world was about to come crashing down around her. The captain's announcement acted like a switch, instantly changing the atmosphere on the plane from one of pre-flight anticipation to tense uncertainty. The low chatter of passengers ceased, replaced by a wave of anxious whispers. Phones were immediately brought out as people tried to message loved ones about the unexpected delay in the economy cabin. Frustration was mounting for them. The source of the problem was a mystery. Some unseen threat in the privileged bubble of first class. Up front, the reality was far more personal and acute. The jet bridge, which had been pulled back in preparation for departure, reconnected to the aircraft with a solid, definitive thud. The sound sealed their fate. They weren't going anywhere. Captain Rostow stood like a statue at the front of the cabin, her presence a clear message that the situation was under her complete control. She directed Mark, the young flight attendant, to stand by the cabin door, his face a mixture of fear and awe, and he kept stealing glances at Serafina, who was now calmly scrolling through emails on her phone, as if grounding a transatlantic flight was a perfectly normal part of her day. Caroline Harrington, however, was visibly unraveling. The bravado and arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a desperate, panicked energy. She started to fidget with the clasp on her handbag, her eyes darting between the impassive captain and the cabin door, as if calculating an escape route. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, trying to regain some semblance of her earlier indignation, but her voice was thin and ready. "You can't do this. I have a connecting flight, a very important meeting." Captain Rostow turned her head, slowly fixing Carolyn with an icy glare. "You should have considered your important meeting before you chose to harass a fellow passenger and disobey a flight crew. Your travel plans are no longer our concern." The cabin door opened, and 2 Port Authority police officers and a stern-looking Global Skies ground operations manager stepped aboard. The sight of uniforms instantly silenced the remaining whispers. This was no longer just an airline matter. The operations manager, a man named David Chen, walked directly to Captain Rostow and spoke in a low voice, but the tension was so thick that snippets of their conversation carried. Full instructions from Sir Richard's office. No fly list has been updated. Luggage is being removed from the hold. Every word was another nail in Carolyn's coffin. She started to breathe heavily, her chest rising and falling in rapid, shallow breaths. She looked around at the other first-class passengers, who were now staring at her with open hostility. She had gone from being a fellow member of the elite to a pariah, the sole reason they were all trapped on the tarmac. The two police officers, guided by a subtle nod from the captain, walked down the aisle and stopped right next to seat 1B. Mum, the taller officer, said, his voice polite but firm. "We're going to have to ask you to gather your personal belongings and come with us." Caroline stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. You can't be serious. You're kicking me off the plane." "We are, Mum," the officer confirmed. "Please, let's not make this any more difficult than it needs to be." This was the final public humiliation. The moment of reckoning. Caroline's composure shattered completely. "No, I won't. I haven't done anything wrong. It's her," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Sarah. "She's the one who caused all this trouble. She set me up." Syria didn't even look up from her phone. Her complete and utter disinterest was in its own way the most devastating response possible. It communicated more clearly than any words that Caroline Harrington was beneath her notice, a trivial nuisance that had now been dealt with. The officers exchanged a weary look. They had seen this 100 times. The entitled passenger who couldn't believe the rules applied to them. "Mum, you can either walk off this plane on your own, or we can escort you," the second officer said, his hand moving subtly towards his belt. "The choice is yours." Faced with the undeniable reality of her situation, Caroline seemed to deflate. The fight went out of her, replaced by a pathetic, whimpering defeat. Tears began to stream down her face, ruining her expensive makeup. So she clumsily gathered her handbag and her copy of a glossy magazine. As the officers led her down the aisle, she was forced to endure the walk of shame. Every passenger she passed stared at her, their faces a mixture of contempt, anger, and pity. The woman in the cream linen suit, who had boarded the plane with such haughty confidence, was now a weeping, disheveled mess being frog-marched off an airplane by the police. The karma was swift, brutal, and exquisitely public. When they reached the door, she cast one last, pleading look back, as if hoping for a last-minute reprieve. But there was none. She was ushered out onto the jet bridge, and the cabin door closed firmly behind her. The grounding had served its purpose. A message had been sent. Caroline Harrington's exit was not the end of the matter, but merely the end of the first act. Once she was on the jet bridge, the reality of her predicament began to sink in with devastating clarity. She wasn't just being sent back to the terminal to rebook. She was being treated like a criminal. The two Port Authority officers escorted her not to the departures lounge, but to a small, sterile security office tucked away in the bowels of the terminal. David Chen, the Global Skies manager, followed them in holding a tablet. "Mrs. Harrington," he began, his voice devoid of any sympathy. "As of 15:30 Eastern Time, your Global Skies Platinum Elite membership has been permanently revoked. Furthermore, you have been placed on the internal no-fly list for our airline and all 32 of our Star Alliance partners. Any existing bookings you have will be cancelled. A refund for the unused portion of this ticket will be processed, minus a significant penalty for causing a flight delay and interfering with the duties of a flight crew." Each sentence was a hammer blow. "No, you can't," she stammered. "I fly with you every month. My business, your business will have to find another carrier," Chen said flatly. He wasn't finished. "The Port Authority is also citing you for disorderly conduct. And because your actions led to the grounding of the flight and required a full security sweep, Global Skies will be seeking financial compensation for all associated costs. Our legal team will be in touch with you." Caroline stared at him, aghast. This was a nightmare. This went far beyond being kicked off a flight. This was an attack on her lifestyle, Her reputation, her entire world. The financial and social consequences were catastrophic. Meanwhile, back on the plane, the second twist in the story was quietly unfolding. Captain Roster, having confirmed Caroline's removal, walked back to seat 1A. "Ms. Jones," she said, her voice now filled with a deep, deferential respect. "On behalf of the entire crew and Global Skies, I want to offer you our most profound apology." Syria finally looked up from her phone and gave the captain a small, reassuring smile. "It wasn't your fault, Captain. You handled it correctly once you were made aware of the full situation. The failure was in the initial response." She glanced pointedly at Mark, who was standing nearby, looking as if he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "He will be retrained," Captain Rostow assured her, along with the rest of this crew. Sir Richard was very clear. This is a teachable moment for the entire airline. "Good," Syria said. She then leaned in, slightly lowering her voice. "Now, Captain, I need to ask you for a favor. The reason I was so insistent on this particular seat, and the reason this flight's on-time departure was so critical, isn't just about comfort." She gestured towards the small, almost unnoticeable satellite dome on the ceiling of the first AS cabin. "This aircraft is one of the few in your fleet equipped with the Etherin 7 secure channel uplink. I have a meeting scheduled to begin in 1 hour with the European Aviation Safety Agency and a consortium of investors. It's the final presentation for Project Nightfall." Captain Rostow's breath hitched. Project Nightfall was the code name for the next-generation predictive weather and air traffic control system that Ethereum Dynamics was developing. It was the $5 billion deal. It was the technology that Sir Richard Sterling was banking on to give Global Skies a competitive edge for the next 20 years. Syria continued. "The demonstration requires a stable high-bandwidth connection that can only be established once we are at cruising altitude. Any further significant delay could jeopardize the entire deal, not just for me, but for Global Skies, who are the primary launch partner." The full weight of the situation finally landed on the captain. Caroline Harrington hadn't just insulted a VIP, she had actively endangered a multi-billion-dollar corporate partnership that was fundamental to the airline's future. The grounding, which had seemed like a dramatic but necessary disciplinary action, now felt like a self-inflicted wound. "I understand," Captain Roster said, her mind racing. "Miss Jones, what do you need? I need you to get this plane in the air." Syria said, simply, as fast as humanly and legally possible. The captain nodded, a new sense of urgency energizing her. "Consider it done." She turned on her heel and strode towards the cockpit. She got on the radio to air traffic control, her voice now sharp and commanding. "JFK Tower, this is Global Skies 7 to 10. The security situation has been resolved. We are requesting immediate priority for pushback and takeoff. I am declaring this flight time critical due to a matter of extreme corporate urgency." Timer critical was a designation rarely used, reserved for flights carrying vital cargo or facing imminent operational deadlines. It would bump them to the very front of the long line of planes waiting to depart from one of the world's busiest airports. The wheels were now in motion, not just to get the flight back on schedule, but to accelerate it beyond all normal procedure. Karma had arrived for Caroline Harrington in the form of a lifetime ban and a legal battle. But for Sarafina Jones, the real consequences were just beginning as she raced against the clock to save the very deal that had put her on that plane in the first place. While Captain Roster was orchestrating their priority departure with the urgency of a military operation, Sarafina Jones had already transitioned into a different state of being. The quiet passenger was gone, replaced by the formidable CEO. Her pod in seat 1A became the nexus of a multi-billion-dollar negotiation, a sanctum of intense focus amidst the subtle hum of the aircraft. She unclipped her laptop, its matte black surface absorbing the cabin light, and connected it to the aircraft's internal port. The main screen in front of her, usually reserved for Hollywood blockbusters, split into a quadrant of encrypted data streams, live satellite feeds, and complex meteorological charts that swirled with color-coded atmospheric pressure systems. A custom-built user interface, the proprietary dashboard of Ethereum Dynamics, bloomed across the display. It was a symphony of information that only she could conduct. Linda, the senior flight attendant, approached with the reverence one might reserve for royalty. In her hands was a silver tray with a chilled bottle of Voss water and a crystal glass. "Miss Jones," she said, her voice a near whisper. "Your water. Is there anything else at all we can provide for you before you begin?" "This is perfect, Linda. Thank you," Syria replied, her eyes locked on the fluctuating data points on her screen. "Just one more thing. Could you please ensure there are absolutely no interruptions in this section of the cabin? No meal service. No duty-free announcements. Nothing until I give the all-clear. My team is patching me through to the European Aviation Safety Agency, and the connection must be pristine. Consider this pod a sterile cockpit, Miss Jones," Linda promised, her professionalism now amplified by a profound sense of respect. She backed away, turning to the rest of the crew to relay the orders. Young Mark, who had been hovering uselessly near the galley, watched the transformation with wide, terrified eyes. The woman he had tried to appease with a free glass of champagne was commanding the cabin's environment with more authority than the captain. He felt a cold dread wash over him as he fully grasped the magnitude of his earlier misjudgment. He hadn't just failed at customer service. He had failed to recognize the most important person to ever set foot on his aircraft. Within 15 minutes, an eternity for Syria, but a blink of an eye in the world of JFK ground control, the 777's powerful engines spooled up with a commanding roar. They bypassed a long line of other jets, their priority status clearing a path down the taxiway. Syria felt the familiar gentle pressure as the plane accelerated down the runway and lifted gracefully into the darkening sky. The sprawling, glittering grid of New York fell away beneath them, a silent testament to the world she was leaving behind for the sterile, data-driven world of her meeting. The moment the fastened seatbelt sign pinged off at 10,000 horse Fissy Syria initiated the secure link, a green light on her console blinked, confirming the Ethereum 7 satellite had locked onto their aircraft. On her screen, a dozen video windows materialized, populated by the serious, expectant faces of the consortium members. Miss Jones, a man with a severe haircut and the unmistakable air of a high-ranking regulator, began. It was Director Dubois of the ASA. "You are cutting it close. We were beginning to think you had a technical issue. Apologies for the slight delay." Director Dubois Syria said, her voice a model of crisp professional calm. The chaos on the ground was now 1,000,000 miles away. A trivial anecdote she would never tell. We had a minor terrestrial protocol issue to resolve, but we're airborne and fully operational. Now welcome everyone to the final demonstration of Project Nightfall. For the next 90 minutes, Syria was a maestro of data and vision. She wasn't just presenting, she was performing. As you can see, she narrated her cursor, highlighting a swirling mass of air over the North Atlantic. Conventional avionics show a moderate chance of turbulence in this sector in approximately 40 minutes. Our system Nightfall is cross-referencing atmospheric data from 3 separate satellite layers and predicting a 98% probability of a severe micro-shear event in precisely 32 minutes. A skeptical banker from Frankfurt, a man named Klaus Richter interjected, "A prediction is one thing, Miss Jones. How can we be sure of its accuracy?" "An excellent question," her RTO Syria replied without missing a beat. "We can be sure because the system isn't just predicting its learning. Please observe." She input a command and a new simulation window opened. I am now running our current flight path through the nightfall rotting algorithm. It has plotted a new course, a deviation of only 3 degree north that will not only bypass the sheer event entirely, but will also, as you can see from the live fuel consumption projection, save this aircraft approximately 400 gigajoules of fuel. We are not just making the flight safer, we are making it more efficient and profitable. She continued demonstrating the system's fail-safe capabilities by simulating a catastrophic sensor failure. The consortium watched mesmerized as the AI instantly compensated its predictive algorithms, filling in the data gaps to maintain a perfectly stable flight path. It was a technological marvel, and she was its master. As she prepared to conclude, Rita, the banker posed one final crucial question. "The technology is impressive, Ms. Jones. No one denies this, but the $5 billion investment is for a global rollout. What assurances do we have that Ethereum Dynamics can manage a project of this scale?" "You are forgive me for being blunt, a very young company." Syria met his gaze through the camera, her expression unwavering. "We are a young company, Herr Reacher. But we were founded on principles of scalability and resilience, the same principles I've just demonstrated in our software. As for assurance, our launch partner Global Skies Airlines has already committed to retrofitting their entire long-haul fleet of 150 aircraft at their own expense based on the success of this demonstration. Their CEO, Sir Richard Sterling, is on standby to confirm that commitment. That is the confidence our partners have in us. I trust the consortium will find that assurance sufficient." It was the final unanswerable move, a checkmate. The consortium members exchanged looks. Director Dubois nodded slowly, a rare smile touching his lips. "Ms. Jones, this is revolutionary. The ESA is prepared to grant provisional certification for fleet-wide testing." Arthur leaned forward, his skepticism replaced by keen interest. "Our syndicate is in. The full $5 billion is approved. Contracts will be drawn up by morning London time." A quiet, profound sense of victory washed over Syria. She had weathered the storm, both the one in the cabin and the one over the Atlantic. "Thank you, everyone," she said, a genuine, radiant smile finally appearing. "Welcome to the future of safer skies." After the call ended, she leaned her head back and allowed the immense tension to drain from her body. She had done it. A short while later, Captain Rostow emerged from the cockpit and walked to her seat. "I just received a text from Sir Richard's personal phone," she said quietly. The single word was magnificent. "He sends his heartfelt congratulations and his renewed and most profound apologies for what you endured. Please thank him for me." Syria said, her voice soft with fatigue. "And thank you, Captain. Your decisiveness was the pivot on which this entire deal turned. It's my job to manage my aircraft and protect my passengers. I just regret I didn't recognize the true nature of the situation sooner." The captain hesitated for a moment. "If I may be so bold, why do you do it? Travel this way. You could have a private jet, a full security detail. You could avoid people like Caroline Harrington altogether." Syria turned to look out the window at the vast, starred, dusted darkness. "My father was a mechanic for an airline," she said, her voice becoming more personal, more reflective. "He loved planes. He taught me that every part of the machine matters from the engine to the smallest rivet. He also taught me that the people who fly on them matter whether they're in the front or the back. When I fly commercial, I see the machine and the people up close. I get an unfiltered view of how my own technology is working, how the crews are performing, how the passengers are feeling. It keeps me grounded. She turned back to the captain. What happened today was ugly, but it was also data. It showed me a flaw in the system. A young flight attendant, intimidated by a display of wealth and privilege, almost made a decision that could have cost this airline billions. That's a training issue, a culture issue, and it's my problem to help solve as a partner. So in a way, Mrs. Tarrington gave me something of value today, a very clear and expensive field test. Captain Rostifer was speechless, humbled by the depth and strategic brilliance of the young woman before her. It wasn't just about humility. It was about intelligence. "Ms. Jones," she said finally, "it has been an honor to fly you." As dawn broke over the Irish sea painting, the clouds in brilliant hues of orange and gold, Syria saw her destination ahead. Upon landing at Heathrow, there would be no normal gate. As a final gesture from a grateful Sir Richard Stirling, the 7th Saint Seven taxied to a private diplomatic stand. A sleek black Rolls-Royce was waiting on the tarmac. Her anonymous arrival in New York stood in stark contrast to her arrival in London. She had boarded as a ghost and was deplaning as a queen. She had faced down ignorance and won not by raising her voice, but by raising the standards for the entire world. So what can we take away from Seraphina Jones's incredible story? It's a powerful reminder that wealth isn't always loud, and status isn't always worn on a sleeve. True power often lies in quiet confidence, in the brilliance of your work, and in the strength of your character. Caroline Harrington made a judgment based on prejudice, and paid a heavy price, losing her privileges and her reputation in a single humiliating afternoon. This story teaches us that disrespect and bigotry have consequences, and that underestimating someone based on their appearance can be a catastrophic mistake. It's a call to all of us to look beyond the surface, to treat everyone with dignity, and to stand firm in our own worth, no matter who tries to tell us we don't belong. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more true life stories of karma and justice. Thank you for watching.